Hi, my name is Meg.
And my name is Rickie.
And we will be discussing Korean immigration patterns and profiles.
Before 1965, the vast majority of immigrants originated from European countries, with immigrants from Asian countries composing less than 5%. The U.S. took measures to exclude Asian immigrants in general from coming to the U.S. While the Chinese Exclusion Act began by excluding Chinese immigrants, it ultimately excluded other Asian groups as well, such as immigrants from Korea and Japan. The U.S. in 1965 passed an Immigration Act that opened all doors and attempted to abolish race-based discrimination for immigration quotas and tried to allow equal opportunity for immigrants. So before 1965, there were very few Korean immigrants in the U.S.
Philip Jaisohn was a Korean-American man who was the first Korean to immigrate who became a naturalized U.S. citizen. He arrived in the United States in 1885, one of the very few Koreans to immigrate before 1965, and became the first Korean-American medical doctor. As a result of the impact he made, the Philip Jaisohn Memorial Foundation was created in his name. The Philip Jaisohn Memorial Foundation is a health and human services nonprofit organization for the Asian American community. Its goal is to strengthen and expand its services while fostering leaders to carry on Dr. Jaisohn's legacy. It was founded in 1975. The mission of the foundation is to fulfill Dr. Jaisohn's ideals through the broad range of medical and healthcare, senior employment training and social services, and educational and cultural programs for the enrichment of the community. We will be providing a link to the website in our caption if you would like to explore more about the resources of the Memorial Foundation.
The graph on the slide depicts Korean immigration from 1960 to 2010. As you can see, there is a substantial increase through the 90s until a sudden drop. Then, by 2000, the number of Korean immigrants increased again.
95% of Korean Americans in the U.S. consist of those who immigrated after 1965 and their children. Between 1976 to 1990, Korea was the third largest source country of immigrants to the U.S. There were multiple push factors for Korean immigrants to come to the U.S., but the biggest ones were that at that time there were low standards of living in Korea and a lack of job opportunities, which the U.S. seemed to offer. In Korea during that time, it was very difficult to obtain a college education and significantly easier in the U.S., so a lot of immigration also had to do with education. Military threats from North Korea, authoritarian establishments, overcrowding, and the competitive college entrance exam in South Korea made America a safer place for Korean immigrants and their children to live. The rapid decline of Korean immigration to the U.S. happened to be because there was improvement in economic and political conditions in Korea. With the increase again in 2000, this was due to the financial crisis in Korea in 1998 and status adjusters, which we will delve into the next slide. Status adjusters were those who previously entered the U.S. on a non-immigrant status and changed their status to permanent residence within a year. This was mostly due to international students who became citizens of the U.S. after completing their education abroad. Oki Lee was a Korean immigrant who studied abroad and ended up remaining in the U.S. In 1930, she was born in Seoul, Korea. While living in Korea, she grew up experiencing what it was like under Japanese occupation until the surrender in 1945. Shortly thereafter, the Korean War took place and she saw the destruction that came with it. America had more opportunities for a college education in her eyes, so that became her goal. With the help of a professor in Evanston, Illinois, she immigrated in 1957 to the U.S. and received an art education degree. Here is an audio recording of Oki Lee's interview with Harrison Lee, where she explains her immigration to the U.S. for college and education.
After Korean War, I was a college student, and then after war, all schools were shut down until the government was restored and the country was rebuilt. So many college students were seeking opportunities to go to abroad to study. So I applied to as I said, I had a good fortune to meet Professor Adams, Miss Adams, who was the director of the student teaching at the university in Illinois, Evanston, Illinois.
Military and political involvement has been a major factor in Korean immigration. Since the 1950s, the U.S. has been extremely involved in Korea due to the Korean War. A significant number of immigrants came between 1950 to 1964, and a majority of those immigrants were either the wives of U.S. military soldiers who had fought in the war or adoptees from the war, which will take us into the next slide about adoption.
South Korea has more overall foreign adoptions throughout its history than any other country as a result of a long and tumultuous history with the international adoption industry. The country has sent 200,000 children abroad since 1955, and over 150,000 of those children were adopted in the United States. The main cause for this was the Korean War, which resulted in a massive need for child welfare solutions in South Korea. When Japanese rule of Korea ended, there were 38 welfare institutions housing 3,000 children, and by the end of the war, there were 482 institutions caring for 48,500 children. A solution was necessary, and the country found it through international adoption for a number of reasons. The first president of Korea, Syngman believed in the necessity of creating, quote, one state for one ethnic people, and believed in sending biracial children who were a result of America's presence in Korea during the war to, quote, their father's land. The extraordinary law of adoption for the orphan child was created to encourage international adoption, but the practice truly took off as a result of Harry Holt. Holt adopted 18 Korean children in 1955 and proceeded to found Holt International, an adoption agency which would pioneer practices of international adoption at the time. By the 1960s, Korea was industrializing, and many Korean women were in the workforce. 2/3 of the women in the workforce were single, and significant social stigma against unwed mothers resulted in many children of single mothers being placed in institutional care. At this point, international adoption in Korea had become a lucrative industry, with many agencies bringing in significant profits. International adoption has continually decreased since 1989. South Korea has put measures into place in an attempt to decrease international adoptions and promote domestic adoption. This is partially in response to criticism they received while hosting the Olympics in 1988. Many sources accuse the country of, quote, selling babies due to their prolific adoption industry. 2,000 children were sent to the United States between 1991 and 2001, which, while it does show a decline in international adoptions, is still higher than South Korea's domestic adoption rate. In the 90s, international Korean adoptees were officially recognized as members of the Korean diaspora and were issued a formal apology by the president. In 2022, the South Korean government opened an official investigation into the country's historical adoption practices, as many adoptees and their birth families began making claims of malpractice. Many adult adoptees were reconnecting with their birth families, only to find out that their families had been told their child had died at birth. So attention has been drawn to the questionable practices of adoption agencies throughout the past. My aunts, Jody and Marcy, were adopted from South Korea in 1986. The photo on the right is a picture of Jody at the age of 6 and Marcy at the age of 3, soon after they arrived in America, in what my mother referred to as their welcome shower. They grew up in a family of 6 on a sheep farm in Bridger, Montana. Today, Marcy lives in Billings, Montana, and Jody lives with her 2 children in Altoona, Iowa. The photo on the left is our family picture, and I have circled my Aunt Jody because I was able to have a lovely conversation with her about her experiences as an international adoptee in a rural area. She doesn't have many memories of her time in Korea or her early days in Montana besides the plane ride and what she has been told by my grandmother, which includes a story in which my Aunt Marcy got lost in a department store and Jody found her by calling for her in Korean. Today, Jody doesn't know Korean and she says that makes her sad. As far as growing up in Montana, although her and Marcy were the only Asian Americans in their school, Jody says she never felt like she stuck out. We talked a little bit about her relationship with her identity as an adoptee. She said she's curious about her past and her culture. She wonders if she has other biological siblings besides Marcy and has taken DNA tests to try and reconnect with her biological family to no avail. She made it clear, though, that she really values the family she has. She's also interested in reconnecting with her culture, particularly through food. She loves to cook Korean food, especially for her children, and says that she's always excited to try any new Korean food she can, and she says she's always curious to learn more. I'm really glad I had the opportunity to talk to my aunt about her experiences and her childhood.
Thank you for listening to our presentation on Korean immigration patterns and profiles.